In the far reaches of the galaxy, there was a planet no one paid much attention to. It wasn't known for any particular resource or beauty, but it was strategically important. The planet, called Zora 7, had recently become the target of a ruthless, alien species, the Graithians, who had set their sights on expanding their empire. The Graithians were not just any ordinary alien race. They were feared throughout the galaxy, known for their warlike nature and unyielding pursuit of power. Over the years, they had conquered countless worlds, crushing every resistance with overwhelming force. Their empire stretched across vast regions of space, and no one dared to challenge them. But Zora 7 was different. It was not a rich world, but it had something the Graithians hadn't anticipated: humanity's involvement. The Graithians had observed Zora 7 for some time and had come to the conclusion that the planet was an easy target. With its small population and its underdeveloped infrastructure, they expected the conquest to be swift and simple. They had no idea what they were about to face. The Grathian leader, Varnak, stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. His hands were clasped behind his back and his face was set in a cold, calculating expression. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded in a low, deep voice. "Zora 7 will be ours by the end of the week." His officers scrambled to carry out the orders. The ships of the Grathian fleet were formidable, each one a symbol of their dominance. Armed with advanced weapons and shields, the Grathians believed they were unbeatable. They had crushed entire civilizations before. What could one little planet do to stop them? Varnak turned away from the map and gazed out the viewports. His mind was already calculating the most efficient strategy to capture Zora 7. But little did he know, the planet had a hidden secret, one that would soon change everything. Far from the Graithians' gaze, a small human ship floated silently in the void of space. It was an unassuming vessel, not much larger than a transport freighter. On board, a team of explorers had been tracking the Graithian fleet for weeks. Their mission was simple: find out what the Graithians were up to, and if possible, stop them. The team consisted of 6 humans, seasoned veterans from Earth. They were known as the Deathworlders, a name that had struck fear into the hearts of alien species across the galaxy. These humans had come from Earth, a planet so dangerous that only the toughest could survive. Over generations, humans had adapted to life on their home world, making them the perfect warriors for any challenge the galaxy could throw at them. Led by Captain Cassius Cade, the Deathworlders had a reputation for being the best. Cassius had been a soldier since he was 18. His body was scarred with the marks of countless battles, and his eyes had seen things no human should ever have to witness. Yet, through it all, he had survived, and that was what made him so dangerous. As he stood in the command center of the ship, Cassius gazed at the screen displaying the incoming data. The Graithian fleet was closing in on Zora 7. Their intentions were clear: conquer and destroy. "Lock onto their fleet," Cassius ordered, his voice calm yet authoritative. "I want all scanners active. We need to know exactly what they're planning." "Yes, Captain," replied his second-in-command, Lieutenant Lyra. She was a sharp strategist, known for her ability to analyze enemy movements with uncanny precision. "I'll have the data in a few minutes." Cassius turned to face the rest of the crew, each of them a seasoned warrior in their own right. There was Sergeant Jace, a towering figure whose strength had saved them in more than one tight situation, Specialist Mara, an expert in alien technology, and Corporal Finn, the team's sharpshooter whose aim never missed. Together, they were humanity's best hope against an enemy far superior in number and technology. "We'll have to act fast," Cassius said, his tone turning serious. "The Graithians won't hesitate to destroy everything in their path. We're not here to make friends. We're here to stop them." Back on the Graithian flagship, Varnak received troubling news. One of his officers approached with a concerned look on his face. "Commander, we've detected an anomaly," the officer said. "There's a small human vessel following us. It's been shadowing our fleet for the past few days." Varnak raised an eyebrow. "A human ship? How did they get this far without us noticing?" "We're not sure, Commander. the officer replied. But they're staying out of our range, just observing. They don't appear to be making any aggressive moves. Varnak's eyes narrowed. It's a trick. They know we're coming, and they want to warn Zora 7. Find them. Destroy them before they can interfere. The officer nodded and left the bridge to relay the orders. Varnak turned back to the map, his mind racing. A human ship acting alone wasn't much of a threat, but if there were more, it could complicate things. He couldn't afford any surprises. The Grathian fleet had to remain undistracted if they were going to conquer Zora 7. On the human ship, Cassius was already making preparations for a confrontation. He knew the Grathians would not let them remain unnoticed for long. The odds were against them, but the Deathworlders thrived on such challenges. Get ready for a fight, Cassius ordered. The Grathians are closing in on the planet. We don't have much time. Should we make contact with the Zora 7 authorities? Mara asked, her fingers flying across her console. Cassius thought for a moment. No. We can't risk revealing our position just yet. If the Grathians detect any interference, they'll change their plans. We need to stop them first, then warn the planet. The tension in the ship was palpable as the crew of the Deathworlders prepared for the inevitable clash. Each of them was ready for battle, but none of them knew how it would play out. The Grathians were powerful, and humanity had only begun to understand the true scale of their strength. But what the Grathians didn't know was that humanity was about to show them something they had never encountered before. They didn't know who had come, but they would soon learn. On Zora 7, the planet's leaders were scrambling to prepare for the invasion. They had no idea who the Deathworlders were or how they had come to be involved. All they knew was that an unstoppable force was heading their way. The Zora 7 Council gathered in their high-tech war room, where holographic maps and alien technology filled the room. They were an advanced species, but they had never faced an enemy like the Grathians before. Their hope rested on the fact that they had a strong defense system, but they knew it wouldn't be enough. What are we going to do? One of the council members asked. The Grathians will destroy us without mercy. We don't have a choice, replied another. We have to trust that the humans are our salvation. The council members exchanged looks of uncertainty. They didn't know much about the humans, but if they could stop the Grathians, then perhaps they were their only hope. As the Grathian fleet approached Zora 7, the Deathworlders readied their weapons. They would not let another world fall to the hands of the Grathians. Not on their watch. In the darkness of space, a new force had arrived, one the Grathians had never expected, and the battle for Zora 7 was about to begin. The stars stretched out in every direction as the small human ship moved silently through the galaxy. Its engines hummed low, barely noticeable, but the crew aboard knew that silence was their greatest advantage. Captain Cassius Cade stood at the front of the command center, his sharp eyes scanning the data feeds that filled the screen in front of him. The Grathian fleet was still a distance away, but they were getting closer to Zora 7 and the clock was ticking. How long until they reached the planet? Cassius asked, his voice calm but with a hint of urgency. At least 4 hours, Captain. Lieutenant, Lyra answered, her fingers flying over her controls. But they've already begun sending out scout ships. They'll know we're here soon enough. Cassius nodded grimly. Prepare for battle. We can't let them get to the planet before we do. The Deathworlders were known for their ability to survive even the most extreme environments. Earth, their home planet, was a place of constant danger, with fierce storms, predators, and natural disasters that would destroy most other species. But the humans had adapted, evolving into some of the deadliest warriors the galaxy had ever seen. No matter the challenge, they could face it and survive. Now these warriors were preparing to fight against an enemy that was far stronger, more technologically advanced, and more experienced in warfare. But the Deathworlders didn't fear the odds. They thrived in them. Cassius turned to his crew, his face hardened by years of battle. Stay focused. We don't know how many ships they have, but we'll make sure they remember the name of humanity. Sergeant Jace, the largest member of the crew, cracked his knuckles with a grin. We'll make them regret ever setting their eyes on this planet. Mara, the team's tech specialist, adjusted the ship's weapon systems, I'll get the targeting systems online. We'll hit them hard and fast. Corporal Finn, the team's sniper, was sitting quietly in the back, his eyes narrowing as he checked his equipment. They're going to feel our presence, he said in a low voice. Let's show them why no one messes with humans. The ship's engines roared to life as the crew prepared for their first strike. They knew that this mission would be dangerous, but none of them hesitated. They were trained for moments like this. The Deathworlders didn't fear death, they embraced it. Meanwhile, aboard the Grathian flagship, Commander Varnak stood before the main viewing window. The battle had become a whirlwind of destruction, with both the Grathian and human forces locked in a fierce struggle for control of the space above Zora 7. Despite being outnumbered, the Deathworlders had proved themselves time and time again, using their superior tactics and relentless fighting spirit to break through the Grathian defenses. As Captain Cassius Cade observed the battle from the bridge of their ship, his mind worked quickly, analyzing the situation. The Grathian fleet had begun to respond more aggressively now, sending more ships into the fray. They were trying to surround the human ship, but the Deathworlders were too fast, darting in and out of enemy fire with expert precision. We've damaged their outer fleet, Cassius muttered to himself. But their flagship is still operational. We need to take that down. Captain, said Lieutenant Lyra, her voice tense but focused. The Grathians are launching more ships. They're bringing in reinforcements. We can't keep dodging them forever. Cassius took a deep breath, his mind racing. We need to act quickly. If we don't neutralize the flagship now, they'll recover, and we'll be facing an even stronger force. He turned to the rest of the crew. Jace, Finn, prepare for another boarding. We're going straight for their flagship. Mara, I want you to disable their weapon systems as soon as we get in range. Jace, ever the hulking figure of brute strength, grinned. You got it, Captain. Let's show them what happens when they messy with humans. Mara, who was seated at her station, glanced up, her fingers already dancing over the controls. I'll do my best, but I can't guarantee how long it will take. Their systems are heavily fortified. Then we'll make sure we don't. Give them time to react, Cassius replied with determination. Let's move. The Deathworlder ship, despite its smaller size compared to the massive Grathian warships, darted through the chaos with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Cassius had always known that speed and agility were their advantages. While the Grathians focused their attention on the larger targets, the Deathworlder ship slipped through their lines, heading straight for the heart of the Grathian fleet. Incoming fire! Lyra called out, her voice sharp as she adjusted the ship's course to avoid an oncoming barrage. They're closing in fast. Hold steady, Cassius ordered. We've made it this far. We're not turning back now. As they neared the Grathian flagship, Mara's fingers moved with lightning speed. The complex alien systems were no match for her expertise. She found the weak spots in their firewalls, slowly but surely unlocking the layers of defense that protected their weapons systems. Got it, she said with a satisfied smile. I've disabled their forward weapons. They won't be able to fire at us. Cassius nodded. That's our opening. Jace, Finn, you're up. Sergeant Jace and Corporal Finn, both armed with high-tech weaponry, moved swiftly into position. The small ship's internal doors slid open, and they prepared for the most dangerous part of the mission, the boarding. On the Grathian flagship, Commander Varnak paced back and forth in his command center, frustration mounting in his chest. The humans had been a thorn in his side ever since they had appeared out of nowhere, and now they were causing serious damage to his fleet. His officers were scrambling, trying to keep up with the humans' unpredictable tactics. We've lost 3 of our cruisers, one of the officers reported, his voice shaking. The humans are relentless. They're hitting us in places we weren't prepared for. Send more reinforcements, Varnak barked, slamming his fist on the console. They will not stand against us, not for long. But Varnak's confidence wavered as he realized that the human ship was now approaching his flagship, moving too quickly to be intercepted. They had disabled the Grathian fleet's ability to strike back, and they were about to board. We've underestimated them, Varnak muttered, staring at the approaching human ship. Prepare the boarding defenses. We will not let them take this ship. Back aboard the human vessel, Jace and Finn had suited up in their combat armor. The ship's interior was a maze of dark corridors and alien technology, but they were ready for whatever lay ahead. They checked their weapons, ensuring everything was in place before the final push. "Let's get this over with," Jace said, his voice gruff. "Just stay focused," Finn replied. "We make it to the control room, disable their defenses, and let Mara do the rest." The two soldiers moved out, their boots echoing in the silence as they entered the airlock. They were about to step onto the Graythian flagship. The mission was simple: disable the ship's command center and take control. The airlock hissed open, and Jace and Finn stepped onto the flagship. Almost immediately, alarms began blaring, and alien soldiers rushed toward them, weapons drawn. "Incoming!" Jace shouted, raising his weapon and opening fire. The first wave of Graythian soldiers was no match for the Deathworlders. Jace's heavy blaster tore through their ranks, while Finn's sniper shots picked off the enemies from a distance. The alien soldiers were trained well, but they had never encountered soldiers like the Deathworlders before. The humans moved, with a fluidity and efficiency that left the Graythians reeling. "Move out," Jace shouted as they cleared the first corridor. "We need to reach the command center." As they moved deeper into the ship, the Graythians tried to regroup, setting up barricades and traps in their path. But Jace and Finn were prepared for this. They had been in far worse situations on their home planet of Earth, and nothing the Graythians could throw at them would stop them. "We're almost there," Finn said as they rounded a corner, the door to the command center in sight. Suddenly, the air shifted. A loud guttural roar echoed through the halls, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Jace and Finn froze, instinctively. Reaching for their weapons, a massive Graythian warrior appeared from the shadows, towering over them. He was larger than any soldier they had encountered so far, his armor black and covered in intricate markings. "This ends now," the Graythian growled, raising a massive axe-like weapon. Without hesitation, Jace charged, his massive frame colliding with the Graythian warrior. The two clashed in a violent explosion of force, each struggling for dominance. Finn took aim, his sniper rifle steady in his hands. "Get out of the way, Jace," Finn called, but Jace was already locked in a fierce struggle. The Graythian warrior's strength was incredible, but Jace's training and resilience made him a match for the beast. With a final push, Jace knocked the Graythian off balance and sent him crashing to the ground. Finn didn't hesitate. He fired, taking the Graythian out with a single shot to the chest. "Nice work," Jace grunted, breathing heavily. "Let's finish this," Finn replied. They reached the command center doors, only to find them sealed tight. A quick glance between them told Jace everything he needed to know. He pulled out a powerful explosive charge from his pack and attached it to the door. The countdown began. "Ready?" Jace asked. Finn nodded. "Let's go." The explosion rocked the ship, sending the doors flying open. Inside, the Graythian command center was in chaos. Officers scrambled to prepare their defenses, but it was too late. Jace and Finn stormed in, guns blazing. "This is our ship now," Jace said, grinning. The command center fell silent as the Deathworlders took control. Varnak's forces had been overwhelmed, and the battle was turning in the humans' favor. It was a hard-fought victory, but the Deathworlders had proven that no one, not even the Graythians, could stand against them. Cassius stood in the control room of the Deathworlder ship, watching as the Graythian flagship's power was slowly being drained. "They did it," he said, a smile crossing his face. "Now we finish this." The Graythian fleet was on the verge of collapse. The Deathworlders had taken their first major step toward victory, and the Graythians finally realized that they were facing a force they had never encountered before. "Prepare for the final assault," Cassius said. "We end this here and now." The Deathworlders weren't just fighting for Zora 7. They were fighting for the future of humanity, and they weren't about to lose. The Graythian fleet, once a symbol of invincibility, was now in disarray. Their flagship had fallen, the heart of their military power shattered by the relentless assault of the Deathworlders. The remaining ships, battered and bruised, were beginning to retreat, desperate to salvage what little remained of their force. But the Deathworlders were not done yet. Cassius Cade and his crew knew that the final battle was upon them, and they were ready to deliver the final blow. Cassius stood in the control room, eyes focused on the tactical displays. The Grathian fleet was regrouping, but it was clear that they were no longer the unstoppable force they once were. The human ship had done its damage, but there was still much work to be done. "Captain," Lieutenant Lyra said, her voice calm but urgent. "We've damaged most of their fleet, but they've managed to send out a distress signal. They've called in reinforcements from a nearby sector." Cassius frowned. The Grathians weren't giving up easily. "How long until the reinforcements arrive?" "At least an hour, maybe more," Lyra replied. "But we can't afford to wait, we need to press the advantage." Cassius nodded. "We can't let them regroup. We finish this now." Meanwhile, on the Grathian flagship, Commander Varnak was a picture of rage. His once proud fleet had been decimated, and the humans had taken control of their most powerful ship. His officers were scrambling to make repairs, but the damage was extensive. He had never imagined that humans, with their primitive technology, and the battle was not over, but the tides were slowly shifting. The Grathians, once confident in their power, now found themselves on the defensive. Their fleet had been crippled, their flagship captured, and their forces scattered. But the Deathworlders knew better than to rest on their laurels. The Grathian reinforcements had arrived, and their numbers were still overwhelming. Humanity's victory was not guaranteed. Not yet. Cassius Cade stood at the helm of the human ship, watching as the remnants of the Grathian fleet regrouped. The stars outside the ship flickered with the energy of the ongoing battle. Explosions shook the nearby ships as both sides clashed fiercely in the vast emptiness of space. "We've dealt them a major blow," Cassius said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "But they're not finished yet. We can't let them recover." Lyra, the ship's weapons officer, glanced up from her console. "Their reinforcements are more than we expected. If we don't act fast, they'll regain control." Cassius nodded, his mind working through their options. "We'll take the fight directly to them. Jace, Finn, get ready for another boarding operation. Mara, I need you to disable their communications again. Lyra, power up the weapons. We'll make our move before they can fully regroup." The crew moved swiftly, each person going to their stations with practiced precision. Cassius's eyes scanned the tactical map, his mind calculating every possible move. The Grathians had been caught off guard, but they were quick to adapt. The next phase of the battle would be even more difficult than the last, but the Deathworlders were ready. They had no choice but to win. Aboard the Grathian flagship, Commander Varnak was furious. His once proud fleet had been shattered, and now the Deathworlders were taking control of the situation. The reinforcements had arrived, but they were disorganized, struggling to adapt to the chaos of the battle. "We can still win this," Varnak muttered to himself, staring out into the cold abyss of space. "We can still turn the tide." His officers, though clearly rattled, remained at their posts. "What's the plan, Commander?" one of them asked. Varnak turned sharply, his eyes burning with anger. "We've underestimated them, but we won't make that mistake again. Prepare the secondary fleet. I'll take command. We will break their lines and crush them once and for all." "But they have control of our flagship, sir," another officer interjected. "We'll need to retake it before we can mount any serious resistance." Varnak clenched his fists. "I know, but we don't have the luxury of waiting. We'll take back the flagship, then we'll deal with the rest." On the human ship, Cassius and his crew had already set their plan into motion. They moved, swiftly and silently, knowing that every second counted. The Grathians had regrouped, and now they were preparing for their next strike. But the Deathworlders weren't about to let them get the upper hand. "Captain," Lyra said, her voice urgent, "the Grathians are coming. They're sending everything they have toward our position." Cassius nodded, his face grim. "Hold them off as long as you can. We need to get into position before they overwhelm us." The ship shook as Grathian fire impacted its shields, but the Deathworlder ship held steady. The crew's training and experience kept them focused even as the battle intensified. The Deathworlders had faced worse, and they had always survived. This time would be no different. Jace and Finn, armed and ready, prepared for another boarding operation. They knew that the Grathians would be expecting them, but that wouldn't stop them. They had one goal: to disable the Graythian fleet's command center and end this battle once and for all. "We've done this before," Jace said, grinning as he checked his weapon. "Let's make it quick." "Agreed," Finn replied, his expression calm and determined. "We'll hit them hard and fast." The boarding pod shot toward the Graythian flagship, slamming into the hull with a force that rattled the entire ship. Inside, Jace and Finn were already moving. The Graythian soldiers, though well-trained, were no match for the speed and precision of the Deathworlders. Jace's blaster cut through their lines, while Finn picked off targets with deadly accuracy. "Keep by. Moving," Jace shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to get to the command center." The two soldiers pushed forward, clearing the way as they moved deeper into the Graythian flagship. The Graythians tried to slow them down, setting up barricades and ambushing them from the shadows. But the Deathworlders had faced far worse. Jace and Finn had seen countless battles, and nothing the Graythians threw at them could stop them. "Almost there," Finn said, as they reached the command center doors. Jace nodded, ready for whatever came next. "Let's finish this." Back aboard, the human ship Cassius and his crew were locked in a fierce firefight with the Grathians. The Grathian fleet was still powerful, but the Deathworlders were relentless. They used every advantage, from their superior maneuverability to their knowledge of combat tactics, to wear down the Graythians piece by piece. "Captain," Lyra reported, her voice steady even amid the chaos. "We've taken out their forward command ships. The Graythians are retreating." Cassius allowed himself a brief smile. "Good. Let's keep the pressure on them. We can't let them regroup." As the Deathworlder ship continued its assault, Mara worked quickly to disable the remaining Graythian weapons. The Deathworlders were gaining the upper hand, but there was still more work to be done. The Graythian fleet was resilient and they wouldn't give up without a fight. "We've disabled their communications," Mara reported. "They won't be able to coordinate any attacks." "Perfect," Cassius said. "Now let's finish what we started." Jace and Finn reached the Graythian command center, only to find it heavily guarded. The Graythians had anticipated their arrival and were ready for them. The doors to the command center slid open, and the two soldiers were greeted by a hail of gunfire. "We knew you'd come," a Graythian officer sneered. "But you'll never take this ship." Jace grinned, his weapon raised. "You've already lost." With a single move he fired, cutting down the Graythian soldiers in his path. Finn was right behind him, picking off targets with his sniper rifle. The two soldiers moved like a well-oiled machine, clearing the command center of any resistance. The Graythian officers, realizing they were outmatched, made one last desperate attempt to defend the control room, but it was too late. Jace and Finn stormed into the room, securing the area in seconds. "We've got control," Jace said, breathing heavily. "The flagship is ours." Back aboard the human ship, Cassius watched. As the Graythian forces began to crumble, the Deathworlders had taken the flagship, disabled their communications and broken their lines. The Graythians, once a symbol of strength, were now on the verge of complete defeat. "Well done," Cassius said, his voice filled with pride as he looked at his crew. "This is how you fight. We've taken the fight to them and we've won." But the battle was not yet over. The remaining Graythian ships were still active, and the reinforcements were beginning to regroup. It wasn't over until the last ship had fallen. "Prepare for the final push," Cassius ordered. "We end this now." The Deathworlders had come to win, and they weren't going to stop until the Graythian fleet was no more. The battle was nearing its end, and the Graythian fleet was in retreat. The Deathworlders had succeeded. They had defeated a superior enemy, one that had thought it was invincible. Now, as the last Graythian ships fled into the void, the human crew stood victorious, but the cost of their victory was evident. Their ship was damaged, and the Graythian fleet had been severely weakened but not entirely destroyed. Cassius Cade stood on the bridge of the human ship, looking at the stars through the viewport. The battle had been long and grueling, but humanity had triumphed. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, to feel the weight of the victory they had earned. But he knew this was only the beginning. "Captain," Lieutenant Lyra called, her voice breaking through his thoughts. The Grathians are retreating, but their fleet is still intact enough to be a threat in the future. We can't let them regroup. Cassius nodded, his jaw clenched. I know. We'll finish them off. We don't leave any enemy behind. On the Grathian flagship, Commander Varnak sat in his command center, staring out at the retreating remnants of his fleet. The once proud armada that had struck fear into the hearts of countless civilizations was now broken and scattered. The Deathworlders had taken the fight to him, and they had proven that no matter how advanced or powerful his fleet was, they could be defeated. We've failed, Varnak muttered to himself, his voice filled with bitterness and rage. But this isn't the end. We will return, and when we do, humanity will know true fear. His officers stood silently, unsure of what to say. Their fleet was in tatters, and their mission to conquer Zora 7 had failed miserably. There was nothing left to do but regroup and lick their wounds. Meanwhile, the human ship moved steadily through the debris of the battle. The Deathworlders had successfully disabled the Grathian fleet's remaining ships, but their work was far from over. The crew was exhausted, but they knew they couldn't stop now. The Grathians had learned their lesson, but Cassius and his crew had to ensure they would never forget it. Captain, Mara said as she approached him, we've taken out most of their fleet, but we've detected a few small groups still trying to escape. They're heading toward the edge of the galaxy. We can't let them get away. Cassius turned. To her, his expression unreadable. How much time do we have? Not much, Mara replied.